loser, penniless, forgotten. Those three words were destined to be plastered across a giant projector screen at my only daughter's wedding reception. But the real crack in our foundation started 4 weeks earlier, right in my own kitchen. My name is Corinne Adler. I'm 64 years old, and ever since my husband passed away a decade ago, I've kept our small neighborhood bakery afloat and my own life entirely independent. I don't wear designer labels or drive a luxury car, but I have never had to depend on a single soul for anything. It was a Tuesday afternoon when my daughter Sloane walked into my house without knocking. She had a sleek leather binder tucked under her arm and a cold, urgent look on her face. She sat down at the table, completely ignoring the fresh cup of coffee I offered her. "Mom, we need to talk about the reception." She started unfolding a floor plan of the banquet hall. Vance's family is on another level. They're high-profile corporate people. I just don't want you to feel out of place or uncomfortable around them. I looked down at the document she slid across the table. My name was scribbled in at table 18, tucked away in a dark corner right next to the loud, swinging kitchen doors. "I'll be fine wherever you put me," I answered calmly, smoothing out the tablecloth with my hands, refusing to give her the emotional reaction she was fishing for. Sloane nodded, clearly relieved that I wasn't putting up a fight. "I'm glad you get it. There's one more thing. Vance and I found the absolute perfect property to start our new business, but we need a heavy-hitting guarantor. Or even better, the deed to your downtown condo to use as collateral with the bank. It's just a formality, really." I looked her dead in the eye. The sheer disconnect in her voice didn't even surprise me anymore. "No, Sloane. That condo is mine, and the rent pays for my retirement. I am not putting it on the line." Her face instantly tightened. "It's my wedding," she demanded, her voice spiking. "Can't you make one sacrifice? You've always been so selfish. No wonder Vance's family thinks you're just some washed-up widow with no future." She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. I just sighed. I didn't shed a single tear. The sting of her rejection had scarred over years ago. All that was left now was crystal-clear reality. I had just started washing the coffee mugs when my phone let out a sharp ping. It was an alert from my bank notifying me of a transaction that would change absolutely everything. I dried my hands and opened my banking app. Someone had just tried to wire nearly every last dime out of the joint medical emergency account Sloane and I shared, routing it directly into an account under Vance's name. The only reason it hadn't gone through was that it hit the daily security limit and was placed on hold. I didn't scream. I didn't call Sloane to demand an explanation. I simply grabbed my keys, slung my purse over my shoulder, and walked the 3 blocks to my local bank branch. I was there in 15 minutes. I sat down right across from the branch manager, a guy who knew my financial history inside and out. In less than half an hour, I signed all the necessary paperwork. I withdrew the entirety of the fund's money that came strictly from my bakery profits and moved it into a brand new private account that only I had access to. Sloane was completely scrubbed from the system. I had barely stepped through the bank's glass doors when my phone started buzzing in my hand. It was her. "What did you do?" Sloane hissed, barely keeping a lid on her rage. "My card just got declined at the florist. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was?" "That account was for medical emergencies, Sloane," I replied, keeping my voice as flat and professional as if I were dealing with a difficult vendor. "Hydrangeas aren't a medical emergency. The money is exactly where it needs to be now. You are going to ruin my entire event," she threatened. "If you keep this up, don't even bother trying to get in the family photos. You'll be a laughingstock." I hung up on her without saying goodbye. I didn't have time for her tantrums. I walked back to the bakery where Holden was waiting for me. He was my late husband's nephew, a sharp kid, who worked in the audio-visual department at the upscale country club, where Sloane was having her reception. Holden was sitting at a corner table nursing an iced tea. He looked incredibly uncomfortable. "Aunt Corinne," he said quietly, glancing around to make sure the shop was empty. "I came over because you need to see this. Sloane sent over the media files for the ballroom screens today, and I think they're setting you up for something awful." He opened his laptop and spun it around to face me. What I saw in that moment dictated exactly how I was going to handle her wedding day. The screen on Holden's laptop showed a slideshow presentation Sloane had titled Roots. I clicked on the first slide. It was a terribly unflattering candid photo of me in my work clothes covered in flour. Stamped across the bottom in massive red letters was one word, loser. I clicked to the next one. A picture of the rundown starter home Sloane grew up in back before the bakery actually took off. The text read, Penniless. The third slide featured a glowing Sloane posing with Vance's wealthy family while I was completely blurred out in the background. The word underneath, forgotten. Holden was watching me nervously, waiting for me to break down, start crying, or beg him to scrub the file from the venue's servers. I did none of those things. The initial punch to my gut quickly morphed into a cold, calculated calm. Sloane didn't just want my money. She wanted to publicly humiliate me so she could elevate herself in the eyes of her fancy new in-laws. "I can accidentally lose this file," Aunt Corinne Holden offered, half closing his laptop. "I can tell them there was a technical glitch and the projector is down for the night." "Don't you dare delete it," I whispered, placing my hand over his. "Let it play exactly the way she designed it." "Are you crazy? They're going to humiliate you in front of 200 people. "No, Holden. They're only going to humiliate themselves. But we are going to need to add a second file to your system. One that you're going to queue up the second I give you the signal." That very afternoon, I opened the safe in my back office. I pulled out my business ledgers, proving my financial solvency. I dug out the receipts for the thousands of dollars in monthly wire transfers I'd sent Sloane over the years to fund her lifestyle. Finally, I grabbed the professional photos from the grand opening of my second bakery location. We got to work on a presentation of our own. There wouldn't be any petty insults or emotional revenge, just cold, hard facts. When Holden left with a flash drive tucked in his pocket, I knew I was ready. But Sloane still had one last stunt to pull before the big day. We were just 2 weeks out from the wedding when Sloane showed up at my house again. This time, she was carrying a plastic shopping bag from a cheap discount store. She shoved it into my hands without saying hello. "I bought you this for the wedding," she said, crossing her arms. "It's understated. I don't want you drawing the wrong kind of attention. Vance's parents are wearing custom couture, so it's best if you just blend into the background." I looked in the bag. It was a drab, shapeless beige dress that looked like a burlap sack, and it was at least 2 sizes too big. It was the kind of garment literally designed to make a woman invisible. I looked up at her. She was staring right back, chin tilted up, just waiting for me to argue or complain that I deserved better just so she could call me vain or difficult. "Thank you, Sloane. This is a very practical choice," I said, keeping my voice perfectly even. She dropped her arms, looking genuinely disappointed that she couldn't pick a fight, and marched back to her car. The second her taillights disappeared down the street, I took that beige rag, shoved it into a donation bag, and dropped it in the charity bin behind the local church. That afternoon, I drove to a high-end boutique downtown. Using some of the cash I had rescued from our joint account, I bought myself a beautifully tailored navy blue suit. It wasn't overly flashy, but it screamed quiet authority and unbreakable dignity. The next day, I took care of one more piece of business. Sloane had been using my detached garage for years to hoard boxes of her college junk and old furniture. I called a locksmith and had the deadbolt on the garage changed along with the locks on my front and back doors. If she wanted to play a game where she treated me like an unwanted stranger, I was going to start protecting my property like one. The stage was basically set. My money was safe, my outfit was ready, and my counterstrike was in Holden's hands. There was only one hurdle left: the rehearsal dinner. And that night gave me the final piece of ammunition I needed. The tension was thick the second I walked into the rehearsal dinner. Vance's parents were footing the bill at the most expensive hotel downtown. I showed up on time wearing nice slacks and a silk blouse from my own closet, definitely not the beige potato sack. They sat me at the absolute farthest end of a long banquet table. Vance's mother, a woman dripping in diamonds who spoke way too loudly, gave me a patronizing little nod when we were introduced. "Ah, the mother," she said, looking me up and down. "Sloan mentioned you run a little bread shop." How quaint. I didn't bite. I ate my dinner in silence and watched the dynamic play out. Sloan was laughing too hard at every joke her in-laws made, nodding, enthusiastically twisting herself into the perfect submissive little socialite they wanted her to be. Toward the end of the night, I got up to use the restroom. The hallway near the bathrooms was dimly lit. As I walked past a set of heavy velvet curtains, I heard Vance's voice drifting in from an adjacent balcony. Sloan was out there with him. I stopped in the shadows. "My mom is still pushing back on the numbers," Sloan Vance was saying, sounding agitated. "The bank needs more collateral before they approve the commercial loan for our startup." "I already told you, babe." My daughter's voice drifted back, dripping with manipulation. "My mother isn't going to be a problem. Once the wedding is over, I'll just convince her that her downtown condo is too much upkeep for one person. We'll force a sale. She always caves to whatever I want. In the end, she's terrified of ending up completely alone." The reality of it hit me like a slap of cold air. This wasn't just about her being embarrassed of me socially. There was an active, calculated financial plot to strip me of my assets. I pulled my phone out of my purse, hit the voice memo app, and managed to record the last 15 seconds of their conversation. I slipped back into the dining room, walked up to my waiter, and handed him $60 in cash to cover my meal and a tip. I walked out without saying goodbye to anyone. In the cab ride home, I emailed the audio file straight to Holden. The trap was set, and they had walked right into it. The morning of the wedding was bright and clear, but inside I felt an absolute dead calm, like the eye of a hurricane. I arrived at the church wearing my tailored navy suit. Heads turned as I walked down the aisle. Sloan spotted me from the altar, and I saw her eyes flare with rage when she realized I wasn't wearing her beige rag, but there was nothing she could do about it in the middle of her vows. The ceremony was a hollow spectacle. After the I do's, everyone moved over to the country club. Crystal chandeliers hung over tables draped in white silk. I checked my coat and found table 18. True to the floor plan, it was the absolute worst seat in the house. Every time the waitstaff pushed through the swinging kitchen doors, the clatter of plates and a blast of heat hit me right in the back. The people sitting with me were Vance's distant relatives, and none of them bothered to speak to me. At the back of the room, I spotted Holden standing by the AV mixing board pretending to mess with some cables. We locked eyes for a split second, and he gave me a barely perceptible nod. Dinner dragged on through the clinking of glasses, forced laughter, and arrogant toasts. Finally, the house lights began to dim. It was showtime. Sloan grabbed a microphone and strutted to the center of the dance floor. Her designer gown sparkled under a spotlight. She beamed at her new in-laws, smiled at her bridesmaids, and then her eyes locked right onto table 18. "Thank you all so much for being here," she cooed into the mic. "Tonight is about my future with Vance, but I think it's important to acknowledge the past, too. We've put together a little visual tribute to my roots, to show where I came from and just how much I've had to overcome to stand here in this room today." The polite chatter in the ballroom died down. The massive projector screen behind the head table flared to life with a harsh white light. A goofy, mocking, circus-style track started playing over the speakers. The execution was underway. The first image slammed onto the giant screen. It was the horrible photo of me in the bakery, exhausted and covered in grime. Plastered across my face in huge letters was the word loser. A shocked silence rippled through the room, followed quickly by some uncomfortable snickering from Vance's groomsmen. The slide transitioned. A picture of our old run-down house popped up. Penniless. The laughter grew a little louder, a little bolder. The third image faded in me, completely out of focus in the background of a holiday photo. Forgotten. People started twisting in their chairs, peering into the shadows near the kitchen, trying to get a look at my face. They fully expected to see me shrinking into my chair, covering my face in shame, or running out of the room in tears. Sloane stood in the center of the floor, microphone in hand, staring right at me with a look of absolute venomous superiority. She brought the mic close to her mouth and whispered in a tone of mock pity, loud enough to echo through the massive speakers. "Careful, everyone." She might burst into tears. Vance's family erupted into open laughter. My own flesh and blood had just turned me into the evening's punchline to buy her way into a family of snobs. I didn't cry. I didn't look away. I kept my posture perfectly straight and my expression completely blank. Below the table line, my phone was already unlocked in my hand. My text thread with Holden was open. I looked Sloane dead in the eyes, letting her see that her little stunt hadn't broken me at all. Then I looked down at my phone and typed a single word. Now! I hit send. It took exactly 3 seconds. The mocking circus music cut off with a harsh burst of static. The giant screen glitched aggressively, flashing bright green before plunging into total darkness. The smug grin vanished from Sloane's face instantly. The ballroom fell into a suffocatingly tense silence. Sloane smacked her microphone a couple of times, looking flustered. "What's going on? Turn it back on," she snapped, glaring toward the AV booth. The giant screen illuminated again, but the aesthetic was completely different. Crisp white text over a black background appeared, "The real story." The first slide wasn't a petty insult. It was a professional wide-angle shot of both of my bakery storefronts side by side, with official business filings showing massive year-over-year revenue growth. Underneath a simple caption read, "Independent owner, zero debt." The mocking whispers in the room instantly turned into confused murmurs. Vance's mother frowned, sitting up straight in her chair. The screen flipped. Suddenly, screenshots of my bank statements were 10 feet tall, with bright yellow highlights showing dozens of wire transfers sent directly to Sloane over the last 5 years. Thousands of dollars for cars, designer clothes, and vacations. Right next to it was the alert from the bank showing her failed attempt to drain $45,000 from the medical emergency fund just 2 weeks ago. All the color drained from Sloane's face. She dropped the microphone. It hit the hardwood floor with a deafening screech. "Cut it off! Turn it off right now!" She shrieked, hiking up her dress and running toward the AV booth, but the door was locked from the inside. Then the final slide popped up. It wasn't a photo. It was an audio waveform graphic. My daughter's voice, recorded on the hotel balcony the night before, blasted through the surround sound speakers with perfect clarity. "My mother isn't going to be a problem. Once the wedding is over, we'll force a sale. She always caves to whatever I want. In the end, she's terrified of ending up completely alone." The silence that followed was absolute. 200 people were holding their breath. Vance's parents stared at Sloane, and the look in their eyes wasn't familial empathy. It was the sheer disgust reserved for a terrible financial investment. The illusion of the self-made rich girl and her pathetic broke mother had been completely obliterated. The screech of my wooden chair scraping against the marble floor echoed across the room. I stood up slowly, smoothing out the jacket of my navy suit. I wasn't hiding in the dark anymore. I felt 200 pairs of eyes on me as I walked with measured, confident steps from table 18 straight toward the center of the room. Sloane was shaking her face, a mask of sheer panic. Vance was frozen near the sweetheart table, looking at his parents for instructions that weren't coming. I stopped a few feet away from them. I didn't even need to raise my voice. The acoustics of the silent room did the heavy lifting for me. As you can clearly see, I said, directing my gaze right at Vance's parents, my daughter will not be inheriting my downtown real estate to finance your son's startup. My money belongs to me. I built it with my own 2 hands. Vance's mother pressed her lips into a thin line, looking at Sloane with pure contempt. They didn't care that Sloane was cruel. They cared that she was broke. I turned to my daughter. Her eyes were wide with fury and panic, but there wasn't an ounce of actual remorse in them. I am not a loser, Sloane. And I am certainly not penniless, I told her, my voice as cold and sharp as cracked ice. And as for being forgotten, starting tonight, I'm just finally free of you. I opened my clutch, pulled out the shiny new brass key to the deadbolt I'd installed on the garage, and dropped it onto her pristine white sweetheart table. It landed with a heavy, final clink. Your boxes of junk are sitting on the curb outside my property. Don't bother trying to come to the house. Your old key doesn't work anymore. I turned my back on her. Not a single person stepped in my way. Behind me, I could hear Vance start yelling at Sloane, followed immediately by the shrill voice of his mother demanding answers. I didn't look back. I pushed open the double doors of the banquet hall and walked out into the cool, clean night air. It's been 3 months since the wedding. The city kept moving, but Sloane's entire life collapsed inward. Once Vance's family realized she brought zero financial backing to the table, they completely pulled the rug out from under them. They yanked their funding, forcing Sloane and Vance to move into a cramped, noisy apartment in the suburbs, paying their own bills for the first time in their lives. Sloane tried to call me about 2 weeks after the fallout. She bounced between acting like a victim and making demands, ultimately asking me to front them a security deposit for rent. I didn't argue with her. I just said no, hung up, and blocked her number permanently. There was no dramatic reconciliation, no forced apologies. It was a Sunday morning. I was sitting on my back patio, which I had beautifully redecorated with potted plants and flowers, now that Sloane's hoarding boxes were gone. The sun was warming my face, and I was drinking a perfectly brewed cup of coffee. The wooden gate swung open, and Holden walked in carrying a white bakery box filled with fresh pastries. "Morning, Aunt Corinne," he said, grinning as he set the box down on the wrought iron table. "Sales completely smashed records this week. Your idea to tweak the cinnamon roll recipe was a total home run. I had a feeling a little modernization would pay off." I smiled, pouring him a mug of coffee. Holden sat down across from me. We ate breakfast in total peace, talking about the business, the weather, and our plans to knock down a wall and expand the main shop next year. We didn't mention Sloane once. Her name was no longer a required subject in my home. I looked around my garden at my house, at the life I had built with my own 2 hands. I realized then that locking a door doesn't mean you're trapped inside. It just means you've finally shut the noise out. For the first time in a decade, I wasn't just a widow or a long-suffering mother or a victim. I was just Corinne. And that was more than enough.